Hello everyone and welcome to the first session of the second day of the Be Ready for the World conference. I'm Bridget from Cambridge University Press and I'll be hosting the webinar today. I'm delighted to be joined by Ali Talbot, who will take you through this session on moving towards a whole school approach to CLIL. Ali is an EAL teacher, trainer and a specialist in change management. So before we start, I just want to go through a few things. You'll notice that your microphones are all on mute. That's because there'll be quite a few of us on the session today. So just to avoid any background noise. Myself and Ali are both working from home, so please do bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. There will be a Q&A session at the end, so please pop any questions for Ali in the Q&A box at the bottom. There is also a chat box where you can put any general comments. But please post questions in the Q&A box just so they don't get lost in the chat box. If you have any technical difficulties, our team will do their best to help you out. But we are recording this session, so don't worry too much. It will be available on YouTube via a link after the session. We recommend listening on headphones for best sound quality. But I think that's it from me. I'm looking forward to getting started with the conference. And now over to Ali.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura. First of all, many thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro from Laura. So I have taught EAL in many different conferences over the last 20 years, from teaching in schools where everyone is an EAL learner, to teaching with a big department of EAL teachers, to teaching in a department of one, just me, with a few EAL learners. So that experience has actually made me become very interested in how you manage this change to a different approach to EAL in your school, because obviously you can't be responsible alone for everyone's language development. So this is an overview of what we're going to do in the session this morning. So we're going to look at what is CLIL, first of all, to make sure we all understand what the key terms are. Then we're going to look at some different steps of how you might choose to manage this change. So moving from creating a climate for change, creating that sense of urgency, why do we need to change, to engaging and enabling the whole school, and then how you would implement and sustain and embed that change in your school. So first of all, I want you just to think about this question, what does a whole school approach or to EAL or to CLIL mean to you? So for me, now where I am in my EAL journey, CLIL and EAL almost go hand in hand, because for me, you can't have a whole school approach to EAL unless you have some elements of CLIL. For me, it means this. It means that all staff, so by that I mean teachers and non-teachers, everybody has a high level of awareness of EAL issues, and they work together to facilitate the achievement of EAL learners. All teaching staff have a high level of expertise in CLIL teaching techniques, and they work together on the provision and evaluation of EAL support. And EAL is prioritised, isn't sidelined. So today we're going to think particularly about the second one, obviously, about CLIL, about how do we move our teaching staff towards this CLIL expertise. So first of all, then, what is CLIL? I'm sure that some of you have, or many of you have got a bit of an idea of this because you've come to this session. So it stands for Content and Language Integrated Learning. So we often talk about soft CLIL and hard CLIL. You might have heard those terms. Now, obviously, it's a bit like boiling an egg. You can have hard-boiled eggs and you can have soft-boiled eggs, but actually there are lots of different things in between. And just like that, in EAL, there are 50 shades of EAL. So what is hard CLIL? Hard CLIL is a school manager's dream because one teacher is doing everything. So you might have a subject teacher, like a physics teacher, who also has a really high level of language awareness, and they are able to steer their students through the language demands of that subject. That is fantastic if you can achieve that. From my experience, this is actually quite difficult to achieve because not many physics teachers have a really high level of language awareness, and not many EAL teachers have a really great knowledge of physics. What's on the opposite end of that spectrum is what we call discrete provision, where you have maths or history or geography, they are all in their departments. And then you have the EAL department, or maybe EAL person, who they might talk about things at break time and lunchtime, like their holidays and what are they going to do at the weekend, but they probably aren't talking about what are they doing in their curriculum and how can they help each other. So this is definitely not CLIL. And from my experience, this is what happens in a lot of schools. Even if they say, oh, we do bits of CLIL, there is probably quite a gap between those departments in terms of working together on a curriculum which really helps the EAL learners. Obviously, if you try to go from discrete provision, from not doing CLIL to doing CLIL, there is a huge problem, because that is a massive gulf. That is a huge leap. And you can see from my little man jumping across the sky that the potential for failing is quite massive. And this is something that I'm quite interested in terms of teacher development, is how do we put those steps in to ensure that we have some success? For me, this is where soft CLIL, if you like, can be really useful. So there are lots of different ways of doing this. Like I said, 50 shades and all that. So I've sort of pointed out here a couple that I've experimented with a lot over the last few years. So one of them is contextualized teaching, and I'm going to talk about that quite a lot today. So by that I mean that the EAL teachers are using materials from subject lessons to teach the English language that the students really need. So this is contextualized. Also, we have on this spectrum as well collaborative teaching, where teachers from different subjects, so you might have the physics teacher and the EAL coordinator or EAL teacher working together to plan a lesson or to even teach together. So bringing in that expertise from both different sides of this CLIL partnership. This is this integratedness we're talking about. Planning, by the way, is very powerful. You don't have to both be in the classroom together. That conversation beforehand can be really, really useful. So this is one of the tools that I like to think about when I am thinking about change management. So it's Cotter's steps. And there are lots of different models for change management, obviously, out there. And you might find one that works better for you. This is one that I've used over the years, and I like the kind of cycle that it gives you. And it came about, like I said, because I was alone in a massive school with lots of EAL students, and it was just me trying to liaise with 75 teachers about their subjects and what I can do to help the EAL learners in their subjects. So the first stage is at the bottom. It's creating a climate for change. So this is, you can see the words, we're building this urgency, we're building a team, we're building a vision, we're sowing the seeds of why do we need to change, what does it look like, how are we going to get there? So first thing we need to do is to talk about EAL. So that's why I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm a bit like an EAL-aholic, if you like. And I often say this, the first rule of EAL is that you talk about EAL. So this is how you're going to create this idea of we could do something different. We do need to change. There's a bit of a sense of urgency here. So who are you going to talk to? You're going to talk to anybody who will listen to you. Obviously, might not be able to do it to hundreds of people in Southeast Asia or in a conference, but at your school, there are people who want to and can listen to you. So other teachers, obviously, school leaders, you need to get someone from that senior leadership team into your team. Parents, we often forget them. The students go home and maybe they are speaking not a very good model, they're not hearing not very good models of English. And what happens to that first language? Where's that going? What's the parent's role in that? And also speaking to the students, because sometimes they can be ashamed of being an EAL learner, and they don't realise the wonder, how wonderful it is to actually be a bilingual student, sometimes because of the language we use to describe them, in fact. So that's who we can talk to. What can we talk about? We need to talk about why do we need to change and what is the vision? What will it look like when we've changed? And how can you do this? Well, obviously, formally in a meeting, you can take a bit of inset. I've been known to say in a school I've only been in for like a week, can I say something about EAL in a briefing, in a whole staff briefing? Just start with 5 minutes, 2 minutes, give people something to take away really quickly. I'm going to give you some of those ideas today that you might be able to use in your own meetings. Just informally by the photocopier, have a chat to the maths teacher. Oh, how is this student, or how are these students getting on in maths? What can I do to help you? That's a great opener. Everyone wants to be helped. You can use student voice. I'm going to show you in a second how I use student voice in one of my schools to great effect. No one can resist the students. It's much more powerful than listening to me. And you need to make a team. So one person, it's very difficult for one person to change a school alone. You need to start a snowball effect of getting like a little coalition, a little guiding team together. So you also need to tell people why. Why on earth do we need to change? Actually, we quite like it how it is. I'm used to this, I'm comfortable. But obviously, if you do what you've always done, then you will get what you've always got. And sometimes what you're getting is not enough. There was a great Ofsted article I read many, many years ago, and the title alone said everything. And it said, could they do better? And that is always what I try and say to teachers. That's great. This EAL student has got an A. Could they have got an A star? Could they do better? So here are some things that experts say about why we need to change how we see EAL provisions. I'm just going to give you a minute to read through these quotes from very different people. So the first one is by Pauline Gibbons, and this is a fantastic book. If you are interested in CLIL and moving towards this integration of language and content, then this is a fantastic book to read, The Scaffolding Language and Scaffolding Learning. So here she's talking about, why withdrawal is not great. Not great for the EAL learner, and also not great for the school. For that integration, you're depriving them of this, other students, of this great opportunity to learn something different from a student from another part of the world. And this often happens, from what I've seen, is this often happens in primary, also happens in some secondary schools. Students are removed from certain lessons in order to have their EAL provision. The second one, it's by Ofsted. So often we don't always like to think of that listen to them or see them as being the experts as teachers. They can often be seen as the enemy. But look at this powerful message. Subject teacher skills are by far the biggest factor in raising the achievement of bilingual students. So that means that, I'm not one to do myself out of a job or my lovely team out of a job, but that means that actually what I do in the classroom with EAL learners is not as important as what the subject teachers are doing in their lessons. So we need to upskill them. If we keep withdrawing these students, actually we are de-skilling them. We're not helping them to really to support, not even to cope with the EAL learners in their classroom. And the last one is by Mike Gershon, who you might know from the EAL toolkit. And he says, good teaching of students for whom English as an additional language is simply good teaching. Now, this doesn't mean that if you are a good teacher, automatically you are a great teacher for EAL learners, but it means the opposite. It means that if you are a great teacher for EAL learners, then you automatically are going to be a better teacher. And certainly people who have attended my training sessions on anything to do with EAL, they always come away and say, everyone should do this. This is also great for native speakers as well. And you might find yourself thinking that today as we go through some of the little activities. Another reason why we should be moving to this whole school approach to EAL or to CLIL is because formal language is really hard. So if you look at these little sentences, this is all again taken from Gibbons' book. So the top one. So the top one says, look, it's making them move, those don't stick. And you can imagine some children talking together about an experiment that they're doing, and they're pointing and saying, oh, look, those or these, it's, look. So they're using these words, these pronouns like those and them, because there is a shared understanding of what they are talking about. They don't have to name it. Later, it's like then take sort of a step back from the action, because they're really in it in time and place. If you take a step back from that, the teacher may say to them, what did you find out in this group? Oh, we found out the pins stuck on the magnet. So obviously both these statements are English, aren't they? They're the same language, and yet they are so different. Suddenly, we've got a whole tense shift. We've moved from, oh, this is happening now, and then those don't stick, kind of trying to make a rule in the present, to this is what we found out in the past. We're adding in ourselves, a we. take another step back and it starts to look even different. So this top language is what we would call, in sort of CLIL terms, we would call BICS. I'm sure some of you have heard of that. It stands for Basic Interpersonal Communicative Skills. Well, basically, it's the language we use every day to communicate, often in writing, although now with sort of quick emails and chatting on the phone, sometimes writing can also take on those features, but it's very low stakes. They're not examined on this kind of language. It's often language for process. We're trying to work things out. Moving down, we can see it becomes much more academic. So now we're looking at much more written language. So later for homework, students maybe have to write about what they have done. Our experiment shows that magnets attract some metals. So now it's becoming much more abstract, not just these pins, but actually, or this magnet, but actually magnets in general. And the last one, I don't even know if I understand it, because basically I'm not a physics teacher, but magnetic attraction occurs only between ferrous metals. That's something they might read in a book, or maybe they might have to produce in an exam. And this language at the bottom is called CALP, so cognitive, academic, linguistic proficiency. But the key word there is really academic. It's formal, it's academic, most often found in writing. However, you might also find this in some formal speaking as well. So just think sort of about in your classrooms or classrooms you've seen, what kind of language we model. So we tend to model this top bit, don't we? It doesn't matter how formal your school is, students are going to be saying number 1 and number 2. So where are they seeing the CALP part modelled? So it's no wonder that it takes a lot longer for EAL learners to master that academic language compared to the chatting in the playground language. Now, I mentioned student voice in terms of a way of how you might do this. One thing I did in a previous school was I asked my EAL learners this question: what can our teachers do to help you? I was the only EAL teacher, so it wasn't EAL teachers, it was subject teachers. And I gave them some little post-it notes, and I gave them some sentence starters, like I find it useful when. These are all positive notes. And then I asked them to write down their ideas, and we grouped them together and we made a little video, and I showed the teachers this, and it was extremely powerful and became a bit of a starter for our kind of rolling stone of change. So here are just some stills from that video. So you can see the post-it notes the students wrote down. I want them to give examples, explain well, demonstrate. The other one apparently is a picture of me. But giving feedback, so that really interesting, they want to know, give me some feedback on my language. And then the last one I've chosen because it was talking about expectation. Look, I want a bit of extra help, push us, encourage us, expect the same. Don't think just because I'm EAL that I'm going to get a lower mark. Again, remember, could they do better? And you need to think about your team. Like I said, you can't do this alone. Who's going to be in your team? Obviously, EAL teachers, maybe subject teachers who are keen to be involved, but also get a couple of people who maybe are not so keen. Tap into them if they've got some influence in the school. I'm sure you know who those people are in your schools. And someone from your senior leadership team is key, and also that student leadership. Something we also often don't do when we're talking about changing is thinking about what is it going to look like? What is this vision? How is it going to end? So this is something you might want to show to teachers. This is something that I've shown to subject and EAL teachers. So what does it look like, this partnership? So for EAL teachers, we're looking at taking those context and text and language examples from those subject lessons to do that language work. So for example, rather than thinking about, let's listen to this about Jane going on holiday and tick off all the past tenses. No, actually, you're doing World War II. You're doing some war poetry, or you're doing the Romans, anything. I mean, the whole of history course is just a dream if you want to teach the past tenses, isn't it? And it's current, it's relevant for them, it's happening in their lessons. Use a text, textbook, geography textbook, a text about something that they're reading in their subject lessons to do some reading skills development rather than doing something completely different. Show them the relevance, pick out that language from their books. What does it mean for subject teachers? Well, this is a list I've kind of compiled from lots of different CLIL books over the years. And lots of subject teachers look at this and they think, oh, I do that already. Yes, I give thinking time. Yes, I scaffold their speaking and their writing, maybe not so much their reading and their listening, but are they doing this? Are they providing that input on and feedback on language and content? So it's the language bit that maybe is missing. What does that look like then in theory? Well, it looks a bit like this. So here's some key stage 3, geography and history. I really like humanities. It's very, very language rich. And it also, geography is also quite scientific as well. So Oxbow Lakes, the erosion is caused by hydraulic action and abrasion. Well, here we've got these words like erosion, hydraulic, abrasion. I don't think any year 7 or year 8 know what they mean, do they? So actually, these are kind of keywords. The same with Harold and the Battle of Hastings. Who is Harold and what was the Battle of Stamford Bridge? So this is obligatory language for this content, and the teacher is already teaching this stuff. You're already a language teacher. But there's another part of this as well, isn't there? Because actually you can't talk about erosion and abrasion without talking about cause and effect. And actually, that's where the marks are. You're not going to get an A star in any of your exams later in life if you can't do this. And this is called content compatible language. So the subject teachers need to teach this obligatory language, which they already are doing, but raise awareness of this other language. And the EAL teachers on the other side, again, this is a partnership, they need to, might want to check understanding of that obligatory language if it's in their lessons, but they can teach this compatible language. And this is where the partnership is really powerful. But they need to know what's happening in the subject lessons to do that, don't they? However, this is what some subject teachers may well say. So, not my job, the language, isn't my content even important anymore? What is she talking about? What is a verb? And this is all scary, and I haven't got time for this. So we need to think about ways to support the teachers so that they don't have this resistance. As you can see, this resistance is built from fear, isn't it? Fear of, I don't have any time, I'm going to be overworked, I'm going to be de-skilled, I'm going to look like an idiot, I don't know what I'm talking about in front of the students. So how do we support them? That brings us to the next stage of this managing change. And you can see here the language that's used, empowering, getting buy-in, so getting people to believe in this and creating these quick wins. How can we show them quickly? Oh, actually, this is a great thing. And you can reap rewards. So what do subject teachers need? What support do they need? Well, this is what I've found over the years. They need to be able to, they need help in identifying these key language structures in their subject. They do not have to know every single tense in the English language. For history, actually talking about the future might not be as useful as talking about the past, obviously, but I think it would be quite hard to be a really good history teacher of an EAL student without having a little bit of an idea of how you formulate and discuss the past in the English language. They need to think about their teacher language. So back to those basic EFL, English as a foreign language skills, like grading your language, checking understanding. How do you scaffold skills work, like speaking? How do you help the students with speaking? Can they identify a problem in an assessment when they've built a resource? Can they find where the potential difficulty might be for that EAL learner? Do they know what it means to be an EAL learner? And they need time and reassurance. So one way you can reassure them and you can help them with those key structures is taking out all the jargon words. So here's another example of what I showed you before with the statements of the Oxbow Lakes and the Battle of Hastings. We've got the content obligatory and content compatible. Oh my goodness, it's just too big. I don't care about these terms. So this is better. Oh, okay, this is much friendlier instantly, isn't it? So what are your key topic words? Any subject teacher knows that. And here's some functional language. Still too difficult? Here's some other useful stuff. So if you want to help make it a bit more accessible to subject teachers, take out all the CLIL terminology. Another way you can do it is to talk them through it step by step. So I've done this in training sessions with subject teachers and EAL teachers as well, because it's good for them to think about how they might use a subject resource. So if you want to think about the demands of a subject, you've actually got to do the task yourself. So think about what's something that the students need to say or write about in your subjects. If this is a spoken task, like making a presentation, actually say it and record yourself doing it and listen back. Don't say, oh, I want the students to do this and to speak together. No, no, no. Actually say, oh, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here today to talk about X, Y, Z. Imagine you're actually doing that task. So here, let's think about the course of a river. So this is like year 8 geography. Great language, so language rich. Write down exactly what they have to say. So here we are. Spits are largely formed of sediment, small enough to be suspended in the water and transported that way before being deposited. This is taken from a piece of student work. Then now, can you find the words which you would see as being the keywords, this obligatory language, and then the other useful stuff, the blue bits, the content compatible language, the stuff they need to be able to talk about those keywords. So it might look something like this. And an EAL teacher would instantly say, oh, look at all that passive. Oh my goodness, there are 3 forms of passive there. And a subject teacher might say, I don't even know what the passive is. It doesn't matter. Just look at the patterns in the language and underline that. Make the students see it. They've got to notice it and be language detectives. Other ways you can get things you can do are to get students involved. So I see this as being a really quick win, because this is a poster one of my Key Stage 3 students made a few years ago. A collocations poster. So find a word, get a word in science. They're doing a lot. The word cell comes up many times. Think about what nouns come before that. So what words can you put before that word? What words can you put after that word? And start to build those partnerships. Some great posters were made and put all over the school. Quick win. For EAL teachers, what do they need? Again, the other side of the partnership. So they need to know how to use this material. I've got a bit of material for maths. What do I do with this? What do I even need to ask for? Is a scheme of work useful? I don't know. They need to feel valued. Look at that second one. Now that is something that I can really get behind as an EAL teacher myself in a busy school. Often EAL is sidelined. So you have to be seen to be an equal member of that team so that you can talk to your subject teachers and give them tips and feel like you can upskill them in your area of expertise. You need some policies that help you and help the teachers to that everyone sees language development as a whole school responsibility, not just you. I can't be responsible completely, just me alone, for the language development of all the students. And I need time and I need reassurance. So one of those things I said at the beginning, just now, was, what do I need? What's the most useful thing if I want to try and make a lesson for a chemistry teacher or a geography teacher? What do I need from that teacher to do that? These are some of the things that they might give me. From my experience, they would say, oh, here's a scheme of work, here's a mark scheme. I look at it and I think, well, I don't understand it, quite honestly, because I'm not a biology teacher. So this is what's really useful. Model answers. I want model answers written by the teacher. I'm still quite staggered actually how many teachers don't have a model answer to show students, whether they're native or non-native. Surely the expectation is actually quite useful for the students to see, this is what I'm aiming for. Student answer marked by a teacher is really good, so you can see this was good. Actually, ideally, you get the subject teacher and you sit down together, look at the model answer and say to them, why is this good? I can see this language. Is that what you want them to use? Do you want them to say this happens because this, or is that just superfluous? Maybe a good and bad model of the same task, and of course the subject teacher themselves. And this is what you can do if you get a model answer. Then you can, they can mine it. So I call it being a language detective. You can make this you put this in a gamey way. This is a bit of Key Stage 3. This is chemistry, and you can see how we've done this in a lesson. So here's a model answer. This is like the end of it. Find these things. Find the scientific vocab. Look how much there is underlined. There's loads of scientific vocab. How do you speak like a scientist, especially at primary school? Where they're talking, you can say to them, can't you? Okay, that's great. You've done. You're talking about this is fantastic. Imagine you're a scientist. What kind of language do you think you would use to say this? Same here, written down. Be a scientist, use these words. What kind of tenses can you see? Any linking language? Here we are again, that linking language. You're not going to get a good mark if you can't talk about cause and effect. And another way to support teachers, and especially that partnership, is give them something to work on together. If you can get a subject teacher and an EL teacher together in the room, even for 5 minutes, think about these things, what kind of social things, linguistic, cognitive things of the students, challenges is the learner going to face with your task. And together, that is a really powerful partnership, and you'll be able to fill in a little sort of framework like this and build it up for all the different assessment tasks or content units in your school. This comes from Gravel's Planning for Bilingual Learners. Again, another really, really useful resource. So this obviously demands collaboration, which is time, which is very precious and a very expensive commodity. So to think about already, what kinds of opportunities exist already in your school for teachers to collaborate, or do you need to create some new ones? So here are some things that I've done over the years. Get people who are really interested in EAL, do a little bit of training, a little bit of talking about your EAL in meetings and stuff, and then get somebody a link in each faculty or department that then you can liaise with, rather than liaising with 25 teachers in the science department. Have one person, maybe one from each of the different sciences, that you then speak to. Can you free up the EAL teachers to go to the meetings? Again, really powerful. So go to a science meeting, go to a maths meeting. Co-planning, you don't have to be in the classroom. In fact, I think it was Virginia Rojas who said, I've had enough of squatting and watching, she said to me once. Which means I've done that a lot as well. If I'm actually in class doing in-class support, if I haven't been part of the co-planning discussion of that lesson, I'm no further ahead than the EL learner. In fact, it can be detrimental, because here I am squatting next to them with no clue about what's going to come next, and I'm just there, and the EL student might just think, I don't really want you to be here because I want to be like everybody else. So co-planning, much better than being in the classroom without a clue of what's going on. Get the people to work together in inset, pair up the EAL team and the subject teams. And I don't know how many of you have ever been into a subject lesson if you're an EAL teacher, or vice versa. How many subject teachers have actually watched an EAL lesson? Go and look, use that kind of pure observation time. Other things you can do are a teach meet. So that means kind of everyone brings a 1 or 2 minute idea, presents to the school. We've done that a lot recently because we've been online. Have an EL tips notice board above your photocopier, by the coffee machine. Tip of the week, everyone try this. Coffee, biscuits, food always works. I'm going to be in the staff room on a Tuesday between 11 and 11:30. I've got some chocolates. Come and talk to me about EAL issues. Focus of the fortnight. So I'm going to show you our correction code. You can't say to subject teachers, everyone now has to correct every single bit of writing, but you could say, for the next 2 weeks, everyone is going to focus on articles. So we're only going to sort of pay attention to articles, and we're going to have a big drive and try and improve students' accuracy. We'll get a little EAL working party, 5 or 10 teachers together in the school working on EAL issues across the site. So this then leads us on to, how do we make this change stick? So how are we going to embed it? So for this, we need policies and we need systems. So this is an example of a marking policy that you might have. Like I said, you wouldn't give this to a subject teacher and say, use this, because they would be literally running out of the door. But you might say to them, okay, look at the ones which are really obvious. Look, SP for spelling. We can all do that, can't we? Probably you do that already. What about T for tense? You might not know why it's wrong, but you probably can see that it's wrong. So get them to do it gradually. Again, like it was a whole school drive. Something else that I've tried, again, with really great success, is language targets. So having EAL students have it be in their planner. Now at the moment it's on OneNote for us, but getting them to think about, what do I need to do for my language to improve, and take it with them wherever they go, so they can look at it before a history assessment. The teacher can say, have a look at your EAL targets, remember what you need to do. Like this one at the bottom, for example, I need to get a better mark in my chemistry explain questions, so I'm going to use more, I need to use more cause and effect language, and then they can tick off when they have managed to do it. Other things you might have are things like an EAL register. Obviously, again, make that public for people, put in the strategies for each level. You might have a policy, a whole school EAL policy, put some CLIL in there, set the expectations for people. Being here at the school means this is what you do. Have you got a teacher development program? How often do you do EAL training? Make it strategic, make it CLIL focused. Can you put some language objectives into your schemes of work? And the most important one, I think, is this professional dialogue. How do you make that happen more? Creating that time between subject teachers and EAL teachers. I would say, if I were the head of a school, there's no way that I would make my EAL teachers teach all the time. For me, the value you can add as an EAL teacher to teachers is so much more than the value that I can add to 10 students in that 1 hour. So I would be trying to cut the timetable for my EAL teachers, get them into faculties as much as possible. Some cross-department observations, like I said, make sure staff are aware of who to ask for help and they know how to do that. And maybe some action research. That's been proven that that's the way forward in terms of a school learning, is do your own research, find out what works for you, and then you're much more involved and you own that. And finally, we also need to address the fear. So for me, this is why change management is so important, because for me, teacher development is change. And if we don't talk about our feelings to change, then actually teacher development won't happen, because teachers can close the door and do what they've always done and get what they've always got. So we need to, I've shown this slide to teachers before and said, okay, so how do you feel? You know, do you not care? It's not going to happen. Haha, this is never going to happen. Are you scared? Are you excited? How do you feel and why? How can you move around that little spectrum? So just to remind you, so these are the key things to take away. So for subject teachers, you are the expert on the language needed for your subject, not the whole of English. You don't need to be. Don't worry about the grammar labels. Look for the patterns. You're already teaching that key vocabulary. You're already a teacher of English. So now just think about the words they need to use those key words well. Work with the EL team. They can really help you. They're here to help you as much as to help the students, and have a go, and it gets easier. And for the AL teachers, it's the same. You are an expert in identifying language needs, and actually teaching a subject focused lesson is like teaching anything else. I mean, I've worked in schools where we've had English for air traffic controllers. So you approach it in the same way, or whether it's an exam course, whether it is a beginner's course, what do they need to be able to do? Get a model answer from those subject teachers, find the language, there you go, there's your course. And you must feel empowered. You know, you are a valuable member of that team. Feel empowered to help upskill. That's the way. We're all upskilling each other. And you are not the only person who is responsible for language development in that school. If a maths student doesn't get to Oxford or Cambridge University, fails their interview because their English isn't good enough, whose fault is that? It can't just be mine, can it? What about the maths department? Surely they have a responsibility to help their students talk about maths in a good way. And again, have a go, it gets easier. So this is the whole school approach. Everyone accepts that collective responsibility for language development. You are a team. You provide input and feedback on the language for your subjects. You're upskilling and supporting each other. Teachers, and we haven't talked about non-teachers today, but they are also part of that equation. And everyone talks about EAL. And that's it from me. Hopefully there'll be some questions.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. That was so interesting. And there's been some really interesting chat. I've seen people saying that Greek state schools strongly react against change. Pakistan, they're already doing some of these things. So it's been really interesting. But yeah, we've just got just over 5 minutes for a few questions. So first question from Noor. How do you encourage CLIL in an EFL environment when students are more comfortable using their native language and they're actually struggling to learn English in the first place?
So so that sounds then like they're not using English in the subject classroom. That sounds to me, well, one of the ways that you could maybe address this or start to move towards that is probably, again, to kind of address the fear with the teacher. And we need to equip the teachers in how do we get the students then to speak English. And that might be about some teacher development, giving them some activities, but it's also about, you know, how we create those situations where they have to use the English. I wonder if there's a way of actually getting then some more native speakers, some, you know, English. I'm not going to explain that very well, but creating the need for them to speak English. So if you've got sort of two non-native speakers, like if I've got two Chinese speakers, for example, in my classroom, there might be a time when actually I say to them, it's okay for you to, you know, you can speak Chinese now, but I'm sowing the seed when I go around to monitor and I say, okay, I'm going to ask you this question. Could I ask you question number 3? And so you need to be ready to answer that in English, and then together they can work it out. If they think, oh, I don't know how to say this word, how do you say erosion in English? I don't know, let's look it up. So you kind of giving them that time to kind of get their head around the fact that it's actually okay. Cognitively, they might achieve more if they are speaking their first language, but you are going to present back in English. So maybe that's kind of a good first step. To give them that time to prepare, give the teacher that kind of idea of, okay, yes, maybe actually using first language is okay at this point, but we're all going to have certain points of the lesson where we're going to, whether it's feedback, whether it's, okay, now this is kind of, you know, this is a story time part, it's going to be in English, we've got a vocab 5 minutes, that kind of idea of creating certain points of the lesson where actually now we're in English.
Great, thanks, Ali. And another question from Purnima. So how is CLIL effective where English is the medium of instruction? So for example, in urban schools in India, how can CLIL be effective in that context when their medium of instruction is actually English?
Well, I mean, for me, I've always worked in English medium schools. This is this thing, isn't it, about the EMI, the English medium instruction. Actually, someone, I think it was at Cambridge University Press, actually, in fact, said to me not long ago, so is EMI, is that just what we're doing when we don't know what CLIL is? Which is quite an interesting question. So CLIL is when you're doing it much more mindfully. So if I'm just delivering my subject through the medium of English or through the medium of French, then I'm not mindfully drawing students' attention to that language that they need. So I'm just I'm doing maybe what I've always done, but just doing it, whether I'm doing it in French or Turkish or English, I'm just teaching the same. But CLIL is when I am like sort of model that I showed you, for example, when I'm saying, okay, so look here, so what kind of language can you notice? How would I look at these two bits here? What word could I use to join them together? Okay, because what other word could I use? Okay, due to, oh, how would that change? Or can I put that in there? How is that going to change the language moving forward? So CLIL is when you are really, you are mindfully, I'm going to say explicitly, but it doesn't always have to be primary school, doesn't always have to be explicit, but it's a mindful, it's a conscious decision by the teacher that I'm now going to engage with the language and make it obvious, show the students what they need to do in terms of language, whereas EMI can just be, I'm just doing what I've always done.
Great. Another question, I'm teaching ESP where I have problems in learning the subject vocabulary. The classes have problems in learning the subject vocabulary. Mm-hmm. What would you suggest? Have you got any tips for learning vocabulary?
One thing I love to use, you may have used this, is Quizlet. So Quizlet.com. In fact, I used it this week with we were doing some math stuff on hypothesis testing. I never thought I'd ever be doing a lesson on that, to be honest. The students really loved it, and they were a bit older actually. So they're like sixth formers, in fact. But I've used this with great effect with younger learners as well. So I would use things like Quizlet. Nowadays, obviously, a lot of us are working online, so that is a resource that they can play games on it, they can make their own as well. You can do things again like those collocations, so you don't have to have it doesn't have to be English and Spanish. It could be, for example, make or do an experiment, for example, like that, or reach a conclusion. You can actually have collocations in that Quizlet, which I find is really powerful. So I would use that. You can also do mind mapping. So they can do that on paper, they can, like in a big kind of book, like a collage. They can do that on things like Poplets. There's like an app. So digital mind mapping they find quite fun as well. And again, if it's digital, you can shift it around, can't you? You can delete things when they know them and focus on the things that they don't know. Quizlet has also got things like competitions as well. So as a class, you can do things like, okay, how quickly can you make the words disappear? Mine 16.6 seconds. Can you beat me? Oh, wow, they've got 13.2 seconds. So you can do that kind of thing as well. So I think you can bring in a competitive element, a digital element nowadays for students. Yeah. I think is quite fun.
Great. We have a question about how does the textbook help us with strategies you've mentioned in an integrated classroom? So I know that we've got our new primary and lower secondary series coming out for maths, science, English as a first language and English as a second language. And we've got all of this CLIL in mind. We've got additional language support sections for the planning, language support feature boxes. And in Global English, we also try and make that distinction between more academic language and feature boxes that Ali's been talking about. So that's something that we're doing from our end. Ali, I don't know if you've got any other things, any textbooks that you've seen?
No, not particularly. This is something that I think is, it's great that CUP are moving towards that, because I think for me as an EL teacher, I find that I have to kind of, I have to kind of make lessons from a textbook myself. So it's, anything where you've got, a kind of glossary where you've got those words that the students need, get them engaged with the vocabulary. But for me, it's those little texts. Can you? It's not just about those key words, because all students have problems with those. For the EAL learners, it's about how do those words link together. So if you can get a little model text, little answer from your textbook, and use that again, to speak like a scientist or speak like a historian, write like a mathematician, whatever. Then for me, that's key.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ali. And that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Be Ready for the World conference. Massive thank you to Ali for her wonderful presentation. This recording will be shared online on a YouTube link later, but enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.